The morning sun poured golden light over the hills of Haran. The air smelled of dust and dew, and I stood by the well, my water jar balanced against my shoulder. I could feel the warmth of the clay jar against my skin as the first rays touched it. It was a morning like any other, or so I thought. My name is Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, from the household of Nahor. Our town was always alive with the hum of animals and the chatter of women drawing water. I loved those mornings, the laughter, the gossip, the glint of sunlight dancing on the well's surface. That day, something felt different. The air carried a quiet stirring, as though heaven itself was holding its breath. As I approached the well, I saw a caravan resting nearby. Camels, tall and dusty from a long journey, knelt in the sand. Their driver, a man with tired eyes but noble posture, watched me closely. He was a stranger, clearly from a far land. When our eyes met, he bowed his head and said softly, "Please, let me drink a little water from your jar." His tone carried weariness but also a strange peace. Without hesitation, I lowered the jar from my shoulder and offered it to him. "Drink, my lord." He drank deeply, the lines of travel fading briefly from his face. Then I felt a nudge within me, a gentle, divine whisper urging me to do more. I glanced at the camels behind him, their tongues hanging, their bodies trembling with thirst. "I will draw water for your camels also," I said. He looked up, startled. But I had already hurried back to the well, drawing bucket after bucket. 10 camels. Each drank until satisfied, and I kept pouring, my arms burning but my heart full. As I worked, I felt something I could not name, like purpose washing over me with every drop of water that fell into the trough. When I finished, the man approached again, and before I could speak, he placed a golden nose ring on my face and bracelets on my hands. "Whose daughter are you?" he asked. "I am the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah and Nahor," I answered, breathless. The man's eyes filled with wonder. He whispered something to the heavens, a prayer, I think, then fell to his knees, praising the Lord. It was then I realized, this meeting was not by chance. When I returned home, I could still feel the weight of the golden bracelets on my wrists. My brother Laban's eyes widened as he saw them glimmer. "Where did you get these?" he asked eagerly. That I told him everything, about the stranger, his camels, and his blessing. Laban didn't waste a moment. "Come, blessed of the Lord," he called to the man. "There's room for you and your camels." That evening, the man sat with us in our home. The scent of roasted meat and baked bread filled the air, but he refused to eat until he had spoken. "I am Abraham's servant," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "The Lord has greatly blessed my master. He sent me to find a wife for his son, Isaac, from among his own kin." My mother's hand froze over the table. My father's eyes flickered with both shock and curiosity. The servant continued, describing how he prayed at the well, asking God for a sign that the right woman would offer him and his camels water. Before I had finished speaking in my heart, he said, turning toward me, Rebekah came out with her jar. My heart pounded. Was it truly possible that God had chosen me? He spoke of Isaac, a man of promise, a man who served the God of heaven. He said Isaac was gentle and wise, the son of Abraham and Sarah, who had waited their whole lives for him. When he finished, the room was silent. Then my father and brother said, "This thing comes from the Lord. We cannot speak against it." Tears gathered in my eyes. My mother held my hand tightly, as though she could hold back destiny. "Will you go with this man?" they asked. The world around me seemed to fade. I looked at the servant, then at the bracelets gleaming on my wrists. I felt peace, deep, unexplainable peace. "I will go," I said. The morning of my departure came too soon. The courtyard was filled with the soft bray of camels, the rustle of traveling garments, and the quiet weeping of my mother. My heart trembled between joy and sorrow. I was leaving everything I had ever known. My mother held me close, her tears wet against my cheek. My daughter, she whispered, may you become the mother of thousands, and may your offspring possess the gates of their enemies. It was a mother's blessing, ancient and powerful, but her hands trembled as she said it. Laban stood beside her, his expression proud yet uncertain. He handed me a delicate veil and said, may this cover you in honor where you go. I nodded silently. Behind me, Abraham's servant waited patiently beside his camels, his eyes respectful but firm. The time had come. I took one last look at Haran, at the clay walls, the trees bending in the morning wind, the life I was leaving behind. Then I mounted the camel, my heart steady, my eyes fixed on the horizon. As we rode away, the sun climbed higher, washing the desert in gold. I whispered softly into the wind. Lead me, O God of Abraham, lead me to the man you have chosen. Days turned into weeks as we crossed plains and valleys, mountains and rivers. The land stretched endlessly, painted in sun and shadow. The servant, whose name I learned was Eliezer, often rode beside me. He spoke of his master Abraham, a man who once left everything at God's command, just as I had done. Isaac, he told me one evening as we rested near a stream, is a man of peace. He walks often in the fields to pray. His heart is gentle, yet his faith is strong. You will find comfort with him. I listened quietly, the stars above us shimmering like diamonds scattered across the heavens. There were moments I grew weary, the sun burned, the winds howled, and sometimes I longed for home. But each time, I felt a whisper inside me. The same God who guided Abraham guides you. One night, as the camels rested, I gazed toward the horizon where the desert met the sky. I imagined Isaac there, a man I had never met, yet somehow my heart trusted him. I didn't know what awaited me, but I knew the God who called me would not fail. It was late afternoon when we finally approached the region of Canaan. The air smelled different, fresher, filled with the scent of grass and myrrh. I shaded my eyes from the sun and saw a man walking alone in the field. He moved with quiet purpose, his figure calm, as if the earth itself yielded to his peace. Who is that man walking in the field to meet us? I asked Eliezer. He smiled softly. That is my master, Isaac. My heart skipped. The man for whom I had left my home, the one I had prayed to love before ever seeing that. I quickly drew my veil over my face, not from fear, but reverence. My hands trembled slightly as the camel slowed. Isaac approached, his gaze steady, filled with warmth yet gentleness. When our eyes met, I felt something shift within me, a silent knowing. Eliezer spoke briefly, telling him all that had happened, how the Lord had led every step. Isaac listened without interruption, then turned to me. He reached out his hand, and I took it. His voice was quiet, but sure. Blessed be the Lord, who has brought you to me. That moment, the desert wind, the quiet fields, the touch of his hand, sealed my destiny. He led me to his mother Sarah's tent, and there he made me his wife. And the scripture says, he loved me. I can still remember the way his eyes looked at me that night, not with possession, but with promise. Our home in the land of Canaan was peaceful. The field stretched endlessly, and the stars above were like a blanket of God's promises. Isaac often walked in the cool of the evening, speaking with the God of his father. I joined him sometimes, listening to his stories of Abraham and Sarah, how they waited so long for him. But as years passed, silence filled our home. There were no cries of children, no tiny footsteps running across the tent floors. Each month came and went, and I began to feel the weight of longing. I saw how Isaac looked at me, not with blame, but with sadness he tried to hide. One evening, as he prayed outside, I watched from the tent's entrance. His hands were raised, his voice low and trembling. Lord, he said, let my wife bear a child. Let her joy be full. That night, as the stars shimmered brighter than usual, I wept softly. Not from despair, but from hope, because I knew the God who called me from Haran had not forgotten me. Years passed before my womb stirred with life that I had begun to wonder if God's promise had faded, when suddenly, one morning, I felt it, a movement deep inside me. It was as if rivers had begun to flow where there had once been dry ground that I fell to my knees, trembling, tears running down my cheeks. "Thank you, Lord," I whispered. "You have remembered me." But soon, the movements inside me grew stronger, violent even. It was as if a battle was raging within my very body. Some days, the pain made me double over. I pressed my hands against my stomach and cried out, "If this is from the Lord, why am I like this?" I went out into the open field, the same place where Isaac prayed, and called upon the Lord. And the Lord answered me, not in thunder, but in a whisper that filled my heart. "Two nations are in your womb. Two peoples will be separated from within you. One will be stronger than the other. And the older will serve the younger." I sat in silence as the wind passed over me. I understood now, the struggle inside me was not merely between sons, but between destinies. The day of birth came like a storm breaking through silence. The midwives rushed around me, their hands steady, their voices urgent. I cried out, gripping the edge of the woven mat beneath me. The air was thick with heat and incense. Then, a cry. The first child emerged, red and covered with hair. The midwife gasped, "He is strong." We named him Esau. But before she could even lift him fully, another tiny hand reached out, grasping the heel of his brother. The midwives looked at each other in awe. The second child came forth, smaller but alert, his fingers still curled around that heel. We named him Jacob, the one who grasps. As I held them both, the prophecy echoed in my mind. Two nations. Two destinies. And though Esau's cry was louder, something in Jacob's quiet gaze made me wonder what God had planned for him. Time moved swiftly. The boys grew strong, each walking a different path. Esau loved the wild. He hunted across the hills, returning with the scent of the forest and dust on his clothes. His laughter was loud, his spirit restless. Jacob, on the other hand, loved quiet places. He stayed near the tents, tending to the flocks, speaking softly, his eyes deep with thought. Isaac's heart leaned toward Esau, perhaps because his hunts reminded him of adventure. But mine belonged to Jacob. It wasn't favoritism, it was recognition. I saw in him the reflection of the promise God had whispered before he was born. Many evenings I watched them from a distance, one running wild in the fields, the other sitting by the fire, weaving dreams into the smoke. I prayed for peace between them, but I could already feel the pull of destiny separating their paths. It was a hot afternoon when the moment of change arrived. Jacob was cooking stew, rich red lentils simmering in a clay pot, when Esau came in from the field, exhausted and hungry. "I am faint," Esau groaned. "Give me some of that red stew." Jacob looked up, calm but firm. "Sell me your birthright first." I stood at a distance, unseen, listening. My heart pounded. I remembered God's words, "The older shall serve the younger." Esau laughed bitterly. "What good is my birthright if I die of hunger?" He snatched the bowl and ate, never realizing that in that simple act, something eternal had shifted. I watched them both, knowing this was not mere coincidence, it was prophecy unfolding quietly in our kitchen. The stew boiled. The sun burned. And destiny moved unseen through our tent. Years turned into decades, and Isaac grew old. His hair whitened like the morning mist, and his eyes dimmed until he could see no more. I tended to him gently, washing his hands, bringing him water, making sure his lamp never burned out. But one evening, I heard him call Esau to his side. "My son," he said, his voice thin, "I am old. Go hunt and prepare me a meal, that my soul may bless you before I die." I froze where I stood. The air in the tent thickened. Bless Esau? The memory of God's voice from years ago thundered in my heart, "The older will serve the younger." I knew then that I could not stand by. God's word had to come to pass, even if it meant I must act boldly. When Isaac sent Esau away to hunt, I stood in the shadows listening, my heart pounding. The moment he spoke the word blessing, the promise God had spoken years ago rushed back like thunder. "The older will serve the younger." I hurried to Jacob's tent. He looked up, startled by the urgency in my eyes. "My son," I whispered, "I heard your father speak to Esau. He means to bless him before he dies." Jacob's brow furrowed. "But, mother, the blessing is his by birth." I held his hands. "No, my son. The Lord chose you before either of you were born. The word of God cannot fail, but you must act in faith." He hesitated. "Father will know. My brother is hairy, and I am smooth. What if he curses me?" I looked at him with a mother's fire. "Let the curse fall on me, my son. Just do as I say." I went swiftly to the goats, choosing the finest. I prepared the meat the way Isaac loved, rich and seasoned. I covered Jacob's hands and neck with the soft skins and dressed him in Esau's garments, the smell of the fields clinging to the cloth. When I looked at him again, he no longer seemed like my quiet son. He looked like destiny in disguise. Jacob entered Isaac's tent slowly, the tray trembling in his hands. I stayed outside, barely breathing. "My father," he said softly. "Who are you, my son?" Isaac's voice was weak but alert. "I am Esau, your firstborn." A long silence. I could hear my heart beating in my ears. "Come near," Isaac said, "that I may feel you." Jacob stepped closer. I clenched my hands as Isaac touched the goat skins, running his fingers over the roughness. "The voice is Jacob's," Isaac murmured, "but the hands are Esau's." He blessed the food, ate, and then asked for a kiss. When Jacob leaned down, the scent of the fields filled the air. Isaac lifted his hands and began to bless him. "May God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness. Abundance of grain and wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers." I felt my knees weaken. The prophecy had come full circle. Jacob left quickly, his face pale with awe and fear. Moments later, I heard footsteps, heavier, louder. Esau had returned. Esau's voice shattered the silence like thunder. "Father, let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that you may bless me." From outside, I froze. Isaac trembled violently. "Who are you?" "I am your son, your firstborn, Esau." Then came a cry that pierced the air. Isaac realized the truth. "Your brother came deceitfully and has taken your blessing." Esau fell to the ground, clutching his clothes, his cry echoing through the camp, a sound that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "Bless me too, oh my father," he wept. Isaac could only whisper, "I have made him lord over you." Esau's eyes burned with fury. "When father dies," he swore, "I will kill Jacob." I felt the blood drain from my face. The same hands that had drawn water from the well in Haran now trembled with fear for my son's life. That night I went to Jacob's tent, my heart pounding with urgency. "Your brother comforts himself with the thought of killing you," I whispered. "You must flee to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him until Esau's anger fades." Jacob's eyes glistened. "Mother, when will I see you again?" I swallowed hard. "Soon, my son. God will be with you." He embraced me tightly. I could still smell the scent of Esau's clothes on him, the disguise of destiny. I watched him disappear into the night, the moonlight tracing his path. Every footstep he took away from me was both sorrow and salvation. I went back to Isaac, masking my grief. "I am weary of these Hittite women," I said softly. "Send Jacob to find a wife from my brother's house." Isaac agreed, not knowing that my words hid both protection and pain. Days turned to weeks, then years. My tent felt emptier than ever. Esau came and went, his anger cooling into distance. Isaac aged gently, his strength fading like the evening sun, but Jacob, my Jacob, was far away. Some nights I sat outside under the same stars that guided Abraham and whispered prayers for him. I imagined him crossing deserts, seeing the ladder of angels, finding love in a far country. No one told my story after that, the story of the mother who waited. But I knew that what God had spoken was true. The blessing had passed to the one he chose, and though my heart bore the ache of separation, it also carried the quiet peace of obedience. When I closed my eyes at night, I could still see the well at Haran, the day it all began. And I would whisper to the wind, "Lord, you led me once by water and light, lead my son still." The house has grown quiet again. Jacob is gone, and Esau's tents lie far to the south. I sit often in the courtyard where the evening light paints the stones with gold. The years press on my shoulders like a shawl that grows heavier with each season, yet my mind drifts back to the laughter that once filled these halls. Isaac grows slower now. His eyes, once sharp enough to read the smallest gesture on a stranger's face, have grown clouded. But when he speaks of the past, of the well where he first saw me, of the servant who brought gifts and spoke of Abraham's God, his voice warms, and I see in him the same gentle strength that drew me across deserts. I remember the day Jacob left. I tried to be strong. I told him that God would guide him, that he who called Abraham out of Ur would not abandon a son of the promise. But when the camels disappeared beyond the ridge, I clutched my veil to my face and sobbed until the stars came out. Isaac comforted me, though his own heart was breaking. "The Lord will bring him home," he said. "And when he returns, peace will come again to our house." Sometimes I rise before dawn and walk beyond the tents to the edge of the fields. The air smells of earth and sheep and the first hint of rain. There, I pray for both my sons, for Jacob's safety and for Esau's heart, that bitterness will not consume him. I have learned that a mother's love is a strange river. It can split and flow in two directions at once, yet somehow it is still one river. Seasons turned into years. News reached us rarely. A trader spoke of a man in Haran prospering among his kin. Another told of Esau taking wives from the daughters of the land. Each rumor pierced and comforted me in equal measure. Isaac would smile softly and say, "The Lord keeps his promises, Rebekah. Wait and see." In the evenings, I light the lamps myself. Their glow touches the carved edges of the old gifts from my father's house, the bracelets, the water jar I once carried to the well. Sometimes, when the night wind passes through the doorway, I imagine the sound of Jacob's voice calling, "Mother." I turn toward the shadows, but there is only the whisper of the wind and the flicker of flame. Yet faith keeps its own rhythm. I know the God who guided a servant to my well will not forget my household. I may not see the end of every story, but I rest in the one who writes them. The wind changed before the news arrived. I remember that morning clearly, a crisp breath of dawn, the sky pale as new linen, the fields trembling with light. Something stirred in the air, as if time itself held its breath. Isaac sat beneath the tamarisk tree, his staff beside him, tracing lines in the sand with quiet patience. Then the servant came running. His robe gathered dust with each step, his face alight with words he could barely contain. My lady, he gasped, there are travelers from the north. Many camels. They say, he paused to breathe. They say Jacob is among them. My heart forgot how to beat. For a moment, the world shrank to the sound of my pulse and the cry of a dove above the roof. I gripped the edge of the stone basin, afraid to move, afraid it would vanish like a dream. But it was real. My son, my Jacob, was coming home. I ran beyond the tents, past the herds, past the startled servants who called after me. The plain stretched wide before me, shivering in the heat. And there, far beyond the shimmer, I saw the line of travelers, camels, servants, women, children. And at the center, a man walking with a staff, his robe blowing around him. He was older now, broader, the lines of toil etched into his face, but I knew him. A mother's eyes never forget the shape of her child. Tears blurred my vision. I wanted to run faster, to reach him before my knees failed. Yet as I drew near, I saw him stop and bow to the ground, 7 times, a gesture of humility. It was then I noticed the figure approaching from the opposite ridge, Esau. My breath caught. My 2 sons, the twins who had warred even in my womb, were walking toward one another for the first time in decades. I hid behind a rise, afraid and trembling. What if Esau's anger still burned? What if the past could not be healed? But then, oh, the mercy of that moment, Esau broke into a run. He threw his arms around Jacob, and they wept upon each other's shoulders. The desert wind carried their cries across the plain like a hymn. When I finally stepped forward, Jacob turned. His eyes met mine, older, wiser, but still the same. He fell to his knees before me, clutching my hands. Mother, he whispered, his voice breaking. I am home. I could not speak. I could only press my palms to his face, trace the lines time had drawn, and thank the Lord who had kept his promise. Isaac, hearing the news, lifted his face toward heaven and blessed God for his faithfulness. That night, our camp blazed with firelight and laughter. The children played beneath the stars, the women sang songs of welcome, and I watched my sons seated side by side. The ache that had shadowed me for years eased at last. The Lord had turned mourning into joy, and the long road of waiting had found its homecoming. The moon was high that night, hanging over the tents like a silver lamp. The camp was quiet, the kind of stillness that feels sacred, as though heaven itself leans close to listen. Isaac lay within our tent, his breath steady but thin, like the wind whispering through reeds. Jacob sat beside him, his hands folded, his head bowed low. Esau lingered near the entrance, his broad shoulders shadowed by the curtain. The years had softened him too, his eyes no longer burned with anger but with something gentler, understanding, perhaps, or peace. I stood at the foot of the bed and watched my husband. So many years had passed since that first night I saw him, walking in the fields at evening, his figure outlined by sunset. Time had taken his sight but not his faith. Even in his frailty, he still seemed wrapped in light. Isaac reached for Jacob's hand. My son, he said, his voice barely more than a breath, the Lord has been gracious to us. He gave me a wife of kindness and courage, and he gave me sons who became nations. Do not forget him. Walk in his ways, as my father Abraham did. Tears stung my eyes. His words were not only for Jacob, but for me, for all that we had lived through. Then Isaac turned his head slightly toward Esau. My son, he said again, your strength is your gift, but your heart is greater. Guard it. Let no bitterness take root. The Lord will make your dwelling rich, and your people strong. Esau knelt beside him, bowing his head until it touched his father's hand. I will, my father, he murmured. The lamps flickered, their light dancing across Isaac's face. He smiled faintly, the lines around his mouth softening. Rebekah, he whispered, my love, you have done well. You have carried the promise when I could not see it. My breath caught. I knelt close, taking his hand in mine. The Lord has been our keeper, I said. He never left us. His fingers trembled slightly. Then let him carry me now. And with that, his eyes closed, not in pain, but in rest. The room felt suddenly larger, filled with the hush of something holy. Jacob bowed low, his shoulders shaking. Esau covered his face. And I held Isaac's hand until it grew still in mine. Outside, dawn was beginning to lift its first light over the horizon. I stepped out and watched the sun climb, painting the sand in gold. The promise had not died, it had only passed on, from Abraham to Isaac, and now to Jacob. I felt no fear, only gratitude. For though my heart was breaking, I knew, God's faithfulness had outlived us all. The nights have grown quieter now. The laughter of children fades early, and the wind through the palm trees sounds like the sigh of memory. I am older than I ever imagined I would be. My hands, once quick and strong, now tremble when I lift a jar or braid my hair. Yet every line on them tells a story, the story of promise, of love, of faith carried through dust and storm. Since Isaac's passing, the camp feels different. His absence is a silence that speaks. But even in the stillness, I sense him, in the gentle way the dawn breaks, in the whisper of prayer before the lamps go out. Sometimes I hear his voice calling my name, and for a heartbeat, I am young again, standing at the well with bracelets gleaming on my wrists. Jacob visits often now. He comes with his wives and children, filling the tents with noise and warmth. His sons play near the same trees where he and Esau once wrestled as boys. Life has circled back, as it always does. When I see the faces of my grandsons, I see Abraham's faith reborn, Isaac's gentleness repeated, and perhaps a trace of my own fire reflected in their eyes. One evening, as the stars began to bloom across the sky, Jacob sat beside me. He spoke softly, telling me of his journey, of Haran, of the night he wrestled with God, of the name he was given, Israel. The name tasted like destiny when he said it. I reached for his hand and smiled. So it is true, I whispered. You are the one through whom nations will come. The promise lives. He pressed my hand to his lips, and I saw tears gather in his eyes. Mother, he said, you believed when no one else could see. I looked toward the heavens, where countless stars shimmered like scattered promises. It was never my sight, I said softly. It was his voice. The next morning, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The air was light, the sky impossibly clear. I asked my maids to prepare fresh linen and perfume the tent with myrrh. Then I sat by the doorway, watching the sun climb higher. Every memory came back to me, the well, the servant's prayer, the long ride to Canaan, the first time Isaac smiled at me, the cry of my newborn sons, the ache of their parting, the joy of their reunion. My life had been woven like a tapestry, every bright and shadowed thread held by God's hand. When Jacob came again at noon, I told him not to weep for me. My son, I said, the path ahead is yours now. Keep your family in the fear of the Lord. Tell your children what he has done. Never forget that we are a people of covenant, not comfort. He wept, his head resting on my knees, just as he had done when he was a child. I placed my hand on his hair and whispered my final prayer. O Lord, who called Abraham, who led Isaac, and who has guided me through every valley, bless my sons and their sons after them. Keep their hearts near you. Let your promise stand forever. A gentle peace washed over me, sweet as the sound of rain on dry ground. I lifted my eyes one last time toward the light spilling into the tent and smiled. I felt no fear, only gratitude, for the God who found me at a well and turned my ordinary days into a story that would never die. And as sleep folded over me like a soft veil, I knew I was going home. When the morning broke after my passing, the camp moved in hushed reverence. The women wove palm branches for the resting place, the men gathered stones and sealed them with care. Jacob lingered longest, sitting beside the mound until the stars appeared. Esau came too. He stood a while in silence, then laid a single sprig of desert myrtle by the stones, the same kind that grew near the well where my story began. From the heights, I could almost see it all, the tents, the flocks, the distant hills glowing under sunrise. I had crossed from time into memory, yet I could still feel the breath of life moving through the generations below. The promise was alive, beating like a heart beneath the dust. Jacob carried the covenant forward. He led his family to the land God showed him. His sons would become tribes, his household a nation. And though he would face trials, famine, loss, exile, the thread of grace would never break. I knew then that my journey, with all its love and conflict, had been part of a much greater design. They will speak of Abraham, of Isaac, of Jacob, names that echo like pillars through the ages. But somewhere between their stories, my name will rest too, Rebekah. The woman who left her home to follow a promise, who drew water for a stranger and found destiny waiting at the well. They may remember that I was bold, that I acted swiftly, that I loved fiercely, sometimes too fiercely. But above all, I hope they remember that I listened, not to fear, not to comfort, but to the quiet, steady voice of God. For faith is not the absence of doubt, it is the courage to step forward when you cannot see the whole path. And love, true love, is not only a feeling but a choice to keep believing that every hardship hides a seed of promise. Now, generations will come and go. The desert will bloom, the stars will multiply, and children will tell stories by the fire of how the Lord guided our people. And perhaps, when they speak of me, it will not be for my beauty or my cunning, but for the faith that carried me through. For every mother who waits, for every woman who prays, for every heart torn between love and duty, let them see in me that God's eyes are never blind to their tears, and so my story ends, yet truly, it only begins, in every voice that remembers, in every heart that still believes. Rebekah's story is not just about a woman who drew water at a well. It's about faith that dared to move, even when the road ahead was unseen. It's about a mother who wrestled between promise and pain, and still chose to trust the God who never breaks his word. From her hands flowed a lineage of nations. From her obedience came a covenant that would echo through eternity. And maybe, her story still whispers to you today. To every heart waiting for an answer. To every mother praying for her children. To every dream that feels delayed, remember Rebekah. God's promise is not forgotten. His timing is never late. That if this story touched you, don't let it stop here. Cherry blossom like this video to help others discover it. Open book subscribe to join this growing community of faith and storytelling. Bell turn on notifications so you never miss the next powerful woman of the Bible. And in the comments, share one thing you learned from Rebekah's journey. Because your words might be the light someone else needs today. Her story has ended, but her faith still lives, in you, in me, in all who still believe.